Cleanliness is what we strive for with the design of watches. Not only do we want something that is highly functional and beautiful, but we also want something striking, something with contrast. This is one of the reasons why I believe the Rolex Daytona, reference 116500LN, particularly the white dial variant, has become so popular. Not only because of the image and the hype associated to it, but because it is a striking piece of design that prides itself on the stark contrast between its white dial, black subdials, and black ceramic bezel. And the watch has to be one of the best examples of contrast in the Rolex sports catalogue. But there is a problem. Daytonas are unobtainable. So then another watch, a very respected piece in their catalogue, is the Rolex Explorer, reference 216570. It is simple and very under the radar, with an awesome pop of colour from the GMT hand. But the question is, are Rolex lagging behind? And with their latest release, has Omega just created something with their new Seamaster that puts them both to shame? Let me explain. It is common knowledge that the original Omega Seamaster Professional 300 is a classic, and the release of the new Professional 300 created a stir at Basel World in 2018, and it caught my attention. I will admit that I had never been a fan of the ceramic models before the release of the new SMP 300. Elements about the watch just didn't seem complete. The font on the bezel seemed strange since it blends into the bezel. The plain dial is nice but looks rather flat. The offset date complication never appeals to me, but I did appreciate that it was a different colour as opposed to being plain white. And the bracelet with its rounded links looked outdated and something that harkened back to the 90s piece. All of these aspects, for the most part, were remedied with the newest release. The only complaint I have is the size of the helium release valve. Like many of you, I would agree. But then it is a quirky feature that they obviously are trying to bring visual attention to, since it is one of the standout features of the watch, and gives the SMP 300 its iconic look. I, like many of you, felt drawn to the blue dial variant, since that is the watch's true colour choice, and it really looks great. The laser-engraved ceramic dial, the red text, the red tip on the seconds hand, the flat bracelet that is sort of an amalgamation between the articulation of a Jubilee and the robustness of an oyster bracelet, the balanced bezel with an appropriate font, the graduations throughout, and the date complication, neatly tucked away at the 6 o'clock position. It is a killer-looking dive watch, with so much detail, and it has the componentry to back it up, with an all-new coaxial movement that is insanely accurate, so much so that it has its own certification. All of this for less than half the cost of a Rolex sports piece. Now, of course, the version before had the majority of these external components too, but the new watch felt more like a revival, and not so much a graduation from the original aluminium bezel variants. Suddenly, with all its new characteristics, the new Seamaster Professional arrived as a more competent watch. And the proof, after all, is how well they are selling. It is seldom that you are put on a waiting list for a Seamaster, even if the waiting period is over a week at the most. And then recently, Omega releases this. A striking polar white dial and black bezel variant. Just notice how the indices and hands were handled, with polishing and black paint, creating a massive amount of contrast, while also keeping it legible. Notice how the white markers on the bezel tie into the colour on the dial, and then the added red text on the dial and the second hand, how the shadow from the wave pattern on the dial is a defining grey. What a knockout. This watch is interesting. And as always, I admire that Omega is willing to take a risk and produce something like this, or the thousands of Speedmaster variants they make. They are willing to experiment and are devoted to enthusiasts. And in the case of this watch, they have done something that their competitor failed to do. Listen to what the audience asked for. And so now this watch has the opportunity to capitalize on a new market segment. What has been one of the most requested new releases from Rolex over the past few years? An Explorer 2. Again, the modern reference, 216570, not with a steel bezel, but with a ceramic bezel. A black ceramic bezel to make it all the more scratch-free, and more importantly, contrasting. This watch would be a hit, and even after years of begging and pleading, there is still no proof that this watch will ever exist. So what is the closest option that Rolex offers? That would be the white dial Daytona. But come now. So Omega once again have made a very smart move, producing a great white Seamaster that is as striking as the white dial Daytona or a ceramic bezel Explorer 2, all the while being attainable, strictly speaking more technically competent, and more affordable. Putting names and resale aside, you cannot say that these new Seamasters are inferior. Even if it does come down to the competency of movements, And speaking about day-to-day practicality, a dive watch is more efficient than a chronograph or a GMT hand. A dive watch is more competent than a chronograph for everyday use. And of course, the latest Explorer 2 is also an excellent alternative. But the one part that is missing, and one that many have been yearning for with this watch, is contrast. The new white dial SMP 300 is a no-nonsense dive watch that I believe is more versatile and pared down than the other color variants of their new releases. But at the same time, it is visually exciting. In this example, they have managed to do more with less, and that ultimately is what makes design such a fascinating subject to discuss, and accentuates our enjoyment and understanding when it comes to watches.